All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're cracking open the official digital ledger of the White House to unpack a highly specific, really fascinating window of time, April 30th through May 7th, 2026. In just those 7 days, 9 distinct presidential actions were issued. We're going to look directly at the primary source log and break down exactly what was published, covering everything from ceremonial honors to international sanctions. So, to really make sense of this, we're not just going to read down in a chronological list. Instead, we're going to break these actions down thematically. First up, a week in review. Second, guiding national awareness. Third, domestic and foreign policy. And finally, a look at navigating the digital archives. Section 1, a week in review. Let's set the stage and look at where these historical records actually live. If you look at the public records digital interface, it's actually surprisingly straightforward, right? You've got this big, prominent search bar sitting right above a chronological feed of actions. The administration pushes these directly to the web, essentially creating a real-time database. But hey, before we get into the weeds on these specific items, we really need to quickly define the categories they use. So the source document groups the week's output into 3 distinct levers of presidential power. First, we have proclamations. These are mostly used for ceremonial dates or national observances. Second, executive orders. Now, these are the heavy hitters, legally binding directives that manage how the federal government operates. And third, presidential memoranda, which are kind of like executive orders, but they usually direct specific departments to act on a very particular issue. Keeping these 3 definitions in your back pocket is really going to help us understand the intent behind each of these releases. Moving on to Section 2, guiding national awareness. Let's check out how proclamations and memoranda are used to direct the country's focus. Okay, so looking at this breakdown, out of the 9 total actions from this week, a solid 6 of them are dedicated entirely to awareness and heritage. You can see this massive cluster right at the top of the data. Literally on a single day, May 7th, bam, 3 distinct ceremonial proclamations dropped all at once. We're talking Military Spouse Day, Victory Day for World War II, and National Physical Fitness and Sports Month. And if we look just a bit earlier in the week, there are designations for Jewish American Heritage Month, the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Weekend, and National Foster Care Month. Now, these 6 specific actions, they serve a really vital, highly traditional function of the executive branch. I mean, they aren't rewriting the tax code or deploying troops, right? Instead, they're officially guiding us, the nation, to pause and reflect on our shared history, like World War II, and to throw support behind really dedicated, sometimes overlooked groups. Foster youth, fallen firefighters, military spouses. It's basically a way for the highest office in the land to set the cultural calendar for all of us. All right, Section 3, domestic and foreign policy. This is where we pivot from ceremonial awareness to the concrete, actionable directives. So here's a question I want you to keep in mind as we look at these next few slides. Beyond setting aside days for reflection, how exactly is the administration pulling the levers of domestic and international policy within this tight 7-day window? Looking at the international and infrastructure front, we've got 2 pretty heavy-hitting moves here. On May 4th, there's a proclamation laying down sanctions against those responsible for repression in Cuba, specifically citing threats to U.S. national security. And then, just 3 days before that, an executive order was signed granting a presidential permit for cross-border infrastructure. Let's actually zoom in on that May 1st executive order for a second. The text here explicitly authorizes Bridger Pipeline Expansion LLC to construct, connect, operate, and maintain pipeline facilities right at the Montana border between the U.S. and Canada. This is just a textbook example of how an executive order provides immediate, concrete authorization for massive corporate and geographic infrastructure. Decisions like this literally have an instant impact on international trade and energy movement. Now, shifting our focus back homeward, the rest of the actions from this week tackled domestic economics and government operations. On April 30th, 2 major economic directives came down. One of them establishes a brand new government web initiative that's completely focused on retirement savings, and the other is a direct executive order aimed at tightening up the standards of efficiency, accountability, and performance across all federal contracting. That retirement initiative is definitely worth a closer look. The official text outlines a goal of promoting retirement savings access for American workers by establishing TrumpIRA.gov. This is a really fascinating example of an administration using a presidential action to directly launch a digital asset. It's aimed right at the financial structuring and the long-term economic planning of the everyday American workforce. You can kind of think of it as a direct-to-consumer approach to economic policy. Finally, Section 4.
The digital archives. Because honestly, understanding the policies is only half the battle. Knowing how to independently navigate these records is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so if you scroll all the way down to the footer of the source document, check out this pagination. We are literally only looking at page 1 of 55 pages of presidential actions. That is a massive ongoing archive. But what's even more revealing is the sidebar over there, under initiatives. The archive is aggressively cross-promoting the administration's active agendas. It links directly out to core platform pillars like Freedom 250, Working Families Tax Cuts, AI.gov, and Doge. And they clearly want to make sure you don't miss a thing. The source material prominently features this super simple instruction: click here or text 45477 to receive updates. It's a very concerted, intentional effort to essentially bypass traditional media filters and drop executive actions directly into the smartphones of everyday citizens. Which brings us to our final thought for today. The machinery of government moves incredibly fast. I mean, with 9 official actions ranging from Cuban sanctions to massive pipeline authorizations to honoring foster care, all issued in a single week, well, it requires some serious vigilance to stay informed. So, how will you track the policies shaping the nation? I highly encourage you to go explore these digital archives for yourself to see exactly what's being signed into the public record. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.